So in popular culture, Frida Kahlo stands tall, right? So not just as a disabled artist or a symbol of feminism, but also as a figure often portrayed under Diego Rivera's shadow. Okay. So basically, what they say is that the Frida Kahlo, okay, is very popular. So in a free popular culture. Frida Kahlo stands tall. So that means that she's widely recognized today. She's very popular. Okay, and not only as someone who overcame a disability, okay, not just as a disabled artist, okay, or as a symbol of feminism or as a feminist icon, okay, but also in relation to her husband, that is Diego Rivera, okay, who is sometimes portrayed as the more dominant figure, right? So, but also as a figure who often portrayed under this Diego Rivera shadow. So we can say that but also in relation to her husband, and who is Diego Rivera, and who is sometimes portrayed as a more dominant figure. That is what this says, right? Now, Frida's vivid iconography adorns everything from tote bags to Barbie dolls. Okay, so they say that her image and style are now commercialized and kind of mass produced from tote bags to Barbie dolls, right? Yet this fervor often dilutes her work into fridolatry, rendering her a commodified figure waiting to be translated. Okay, so they say that the obsession with Frida often turns her into a brand, or maybe an idol, or maybe something object of worship. Okay, and that is striping away the depth of her art and turning her into something a very simplified version of it. Okay, but she's way more beyond that. Okay, so that is basically the case. So maybe in a coming paragraph the author will going to tell us that what are more dynamic dimensions that needs to be discussed in the case of Frida Kahlo. Okay, so basically the paragraph one says that Frida Kahlo is very famous, she's very popular. Okay, but the case is that her identity is kind of I mean, like zeroed down to kind of symbols and you can say iconoclast. Okay, so I'm like iconography. Okay, so that's the case, overshadowing her real version. So let's see what is the real version of this Frida Kahlo is all about, right? It was in 1938 that Frida painted blah blah blah. Okay, what the water gave me. This piece, a profound reflection of her psyche and experiences, inadvertently captured her to international acclaim and perhaps misrepresentation. Okay, so 1938 mein she created one kind of painting. Okay, so this piece, a profound reflection of her psyche. So maybe this painting of what the water gave me. Okay, so it kinds of expressed her inner life. Okay, but also led to the fame. But again, then there has some sort of the misrepresentation. The self-portrait depicts Carlo's feet in a bathtub with a surrealistic montage rising above them, right? Now, surrealistic is one form of art, right? So the it says that the self painting the in fact the self portrait, so we can say that the painting is kind of a self portrait. Okay, so painting shows her feet in a tub. Okay, and depicts Carlos feet in a bathtub with a surrealistic montage rising above them. Okay, so it's a kind of symbolic imagery. Let's see what is that. Now, French surrealist Andre Breton, who happened to visit Mexico during its creation, was captivated. So it says that famous surrealist artist Andre Breton, okay, so they saw the painting and was quite fascinated by it. Now, declaring her a natural surrealist, he facilitated her New York debut, right? So I'm like this guy, Andre Breton, he labeled her as a spontaneous surrealist and kind of make the debut, okay, facilitated her New York debut. Though the label introduced her art to Western audiences, it was also reductive. Okay, so this categorization made her famous abroad, but it actually kind of oversimplified her work. Frida's narrative, especially in the West, shifted to that of a naive artist, untamed and instinctive, untouched by formal surrealism. Just hold down. Okay, so sorry for the disruption. So there are a lot of bells that happens whenever I'm recording the video. So sorry, yeah, right? So French surrealist, this is the case. So though the label introduced her art to Western audiences, it was also reductive. Okay, I mean like this categorization made her famous abroad, but it actually kind of reductive. So oversimplified her work. Now Frida's narrative, especially in the West, shifted to that of a naive artist, untamed and instinctive, untouched by formal surrealism. Okay, now Western audiences begin to view her as kind of untamed is untrained, okay, artist who's created art by instinct, okay, not as someone with you can say untouched by formal surrealism, okay, somebody who's not touched with formalism, sorry, formal surrealism, right? So basically, we can say that this paragraph is more about कि 1938 में she painted some self-portrait of her, okay, that became quite famous, okay, and or kind of the label of natural surrealist misrepresented her as an instinctive outsiders, okay, so that's the case. They say that कि उसका reductive कर दिया इस painting ने, तो और भी उसके dimensions थे. So let's further go into this particular passage and see what is there in the case, okay. But to view Kahlo as an accidental genius is to grossly misunderstand her. Okay, so the author is saying that ki, thinking of her that ki, she's just lucky by chance. Okay, she's an accidental genius. Okay, it's kind of grossly misunderstanding her. She was deeply conscious of her cultural identity and astutely curated her public image. Okay, that says that she carefully shaped her identity and appearance. Okay, born in Mexico City to the German born photographer Kahlo, Frida was well aware of her mestizo heritage. Okay, so they say that she's born in Mexico City, okay, and she is born to the German born photographer. So Frida was aware of her heritage. Okay, maybe there's a mixed heritage that we can conclude German wala hai, okay, and Mexico mein hua tha, so that's the case. Her fashion, her unibrow accentuated with eyeliner, and even her public appearances were meticulously crafted. Okay, so she deliberately used all her appearances, makeup, and presentation to build the image. Okay, and then later on, we can say in a world where the personal and the political often collide, Frida stood as a symbol embodying and manipulating her complex identity. Okay, so she used her image to maybe kind of, we can say, world where the personal and the political often collide, Frida stands as a symbol embodying and manipulating her complex identity. Okay, so basically, it is more about ki Frida was not just a kind of accidental genius. Okay, she actively, I mean, like she intentionally shaped her art and personal appearances to reflect her identity, right? So that's basically this particular paragraph is actually talking about that it is done intentionally. Okay, now, the dichotomy in Kahalo's global perception was all evident in her home country. Okay, so the dichotomy in Kahalo's global perception was also evident in her home country. Okay, so the mixed ways that she was seen abroad and was also present in Mexico. So, take for instance her and Diego's residence in Mexico City, designed by the innovative architect Juan O. German in the 1930s. The house was a beacon of modernity, embodying past post-revolution ideals of simplicity and functionality. Okay, so they say that their house also reflected kind of the modern architectural, okay, ideas of the time. Okay, but it was more than just bricks and mortar, but there is something more to more dimensions to the house just than rather than just being a physical house. The this house, which saw many renowned visitors, was a testament to their cosmopolitan essence, symbolizing the duality of traditional Mexican ethos and progressive internationalism. So they say that their house represented both Mexican traditions and kind of progressive or global, we can call it as modernism, right? So basically, this is all about Rivera Kahlo's house, okay, that is symbolizes both modern progress and Mexican tradition, okay. So that's the case. Now, however, such subtleties often got lost in transition, okay, कि maybe that outsiders fail to take a note of all these complexities, right? 1934's Harper's Bazaar feature on the couple's house focused on its folklore elements rather than its functionalist design, perpetuating Mexico as a quaint, exotic land, barely touching modernity. Okay. Now, Harper's Bazaar is a kind of US media. Okay. So they say that what did they do is that they just kind of focus on the folklore elements, okay, and rather than the ignoring the house ka functional design, okay, perpetuating Mexico as a quaint and exotic land, barely touching modernity, that their house actually ignore modernity aspect, okay, and it is more about the kind of the stereotypes of the Mexico, okay. So that is what the case, right? The narrative was clear: Mexico was the other, and the Rivera Kahlo house, despite its revolutionary architecture, was another picturesque element of the otherness. Okay, so basically, they say that the Western media, okay, framed Mexico as exotic and foreign, okay, but reducing the house of them to be a quite a stereotypical kind of a thing. Okay, so basically, it's kind of how this Harper magazine basically this criticized, okay, or ignored the modern and intellectual dimensions of their house, okay. So that's the case. Now such misrepresentation persisted कि इस तरीके की misrepresentations चलती रही. Fast forward to 2022 and Salma Hayek's portrayal of Carlo on screen was reimagined to be more sultry, less authentic, right? So the film Frida glamorized her life, okay. So then fast forward to 2002 and Salma Hayek's portrayal of Carlo on screen. So maybe some film that is based on Frida, okay, was reimagined to be more sultry and less authentic. So the film also kind of glamorized her life, okay, instead of showing the true aspect of it. And in a cringe-worthy 2016 concert, Madonna's interaction with Frida lookalike from the audience reduced the artist to a mere caricature. Okay, so maybe this Madonna's kind of interaction with Frida lookalike, okay, further reduce the values. Okay, no, not the values. Okay, I mean like the portrayal of the Frida Kahlo. Now the represent reinterpretations and misappropriations of Frida's legacy raise poignant questions about how narratives, especially those of iconic figures, are shaped. Okay, now from this the author gets into it that these kinds of the distortions, okay, about the Frida's legacy, so they raise important questions that who controls the stories of the famous people. Okay, last Halloween, in an anecdotal instance, a young woman with a naturally prominent unibrow was mistakenly identified as Frida Kahlo at a party. Okay, so this shows that I mean like kind of it is just the Frida Kahlo is just being reduced to this unibrow, okay, prominent unibrow, rather than ignoring all the complexity that she actually brings with her. Now the challenge then remains: how do we truly understand, appreciate, and remember Frida beyond the stereotypes and the commodified souvenirs? Okay, so basically they say that the question still remains the prominent, that how can we actually kind of, let's say, um there's no, okay, can we honor her real story, okay, rather than just the commercialized image of hers. Okay, so overall we can say that the overall essence of the passage is that it starts with that Frida Kahlo is a popular cultural icon, okay, but her image is kind of, we can say, it's being just oversimplified, it is being commercialized, or it is being exoticized, okay. And now from early mislabeling by surrealists to the modern pop cultures, okay, her true artistries are often being overshadowed by her appearance, and that is the case. And then the author gets into the core question that what should we do? Okay, I mean, like, instead of engaging with her real life art, we are challenged to see her authentically. So that is what this particular passage is all about. Okay, slightly difficult to comprehend, I'm sure, but again, I think so that with the practice, and I mean, like, this sort of the idea would have surrealist arts related stuff. So very less of the passages that we have solved from the same genre. So this would have given you a slight trouble, right? Now, in a world where the personal and the political often collide, Frida stood as a symbol, okay, embodying and manipulating her complex identity. What does the author intend to convey using this particular statement, right? Now, basically, बात क्या हो रही थी? Okay, so here it was this, right? Yeah, Frida stood as a symbol embodying and manipulating her complex identity. The correct answer is A, that the Frida Kahlo symbolized diverse cultural, personal, and socio-political aspects and skillfully wielded her complex identity to convey her message. This is what this particular passage is talking about, no? Okay, so अगर हम इसको देखते हैं, so um, she was deeply conscious of her cultural identity and astutely curated her public image. Okay, so this directly supports the idea that she symbolized, so she conscious of her cultural identity. Okay, so she symbolized diverse cultural, okay, so personal and solo social political aspects, and she did it skillfully. So astutely is something which is skillfully, right? Now, again, we can get into this line that her fashion, her unibrow accentuated with eyeliner, and even her public appearances were meticulously crafted. Okay, so this shows that the author, the Frida Kahlo, deliberately uses all these tools, okay, to build her identity to convey a meaning. Okay, and then the last line, that in a world where the personal and the political often collide, okay, Frida stood as a symbol embodying and manipulating her complex identity. So we can say that Frida Kahlo symbolized diverse cultural, personal, and socio-political aspects and skillfully wielded her complex identity to convey her message. So this is absolutely true as per the passage. I hope you got this reason that why this particular statement is true, right? So yeah, in a world where this thing, right? Yeah, so let's go to the option number 2. Okay, so while Frida Kahlo emerged as a cultural symbol, she distorted her true self, okay, potentially misleading audiences about her genuine identity. Okay, now this is not what this passage is saying. Okay, I mean, this is the interpretation suggests a more deceptive or negative undertone in Kahlo's presentation of her identity, okay, implying that she might have deliberately distorted her true self to mislead audience, okay. However, the passage actually points a portrait of Kahlo as someone who is very deeply conscious and intentional about her identity's curation, okay. It emphasizes the astute awareness of her cultural, you can say cultural identity and how she actually curated, okay. So that's the case that this distorting her true self is not correct as per the passage, right? So there are a lot of the issues. I'm like distorted नहीं था ना, okay? And moreover, अगर हम आगे इसकी line भी देखें, so who distorts the Frida Kahlo was that कि यहाँ पे जब वो surrealist French surrealist की बात हुई थी ना, okay? So ये वाला yes, Andre Breton, okay, who happened to this. Though the label introduced her art to this, okay, and it was also reductive, okay, so that is the case. So who made it looks like that she's distorting her true personality or the true self, okay, so that is not being done by her, but it is being done by others misrepresentation. Not that Frida misled people, and the author wasn't negative about Frida at any point of the time, right? Frida Kahlo was able to converge her personal and political views to create a dichotomized symbol of both embodiment and manipulation. Okay, now the case here is that it uses the term dichotomized symbol. Okay, the passage does not present her identity as a binary. It says personal and political collide, and she both embodied. Okay, so it says that no, that in a world where the personal and political often collide, okay, Frida stood as a symbol embodying and manipulating her complex identity, right? Whereas the option number C says that Frida Kahlo was able to converge her personal and political views to create a dichotomized symbol of both embodiment and manipulation. ये problem है, okay? I'm like the language is awkward, okay? It says something else which the passage is not actually conveying, okay? The term dichotomized symbol, अगर meaning देखे इसका, so dichotomized symbol का meaning होता है something that suggests the opposing relationship, opposing, okay? So dichotomize, so opposite relation or the aspects of embodiment and manipulation in Kahlo's representation. But the passage acknowledges that Kahlo's ability to I mean like we can say both, वो both वाला case आ रहा है, to both embody and manipulate her identity, okay? It does not present this as a contradictory action. Instead, Kahlo's embodiment of her cultural, personal, and political identity seamlessly coexist with her manipulation, or we can say a skillful curation of that image. Okay, so that is the problem here with this particular option. Now, in a realm where the political and personal intricacies of life intervened, Frida Kahlo was able to cunningly adjust her identity for public perception. Okay, now the word again here is kind of cunningly. Okay, cunningly is not astutely. Okay, so cunningly is more of you can say a kind of clever in a negative manner. Okay, sly could be the another word for it. Okay, something that is done we can say that deceive karna kisi ko dhoka dena. Okay, that is deceptive manipulation. So that is basically cunningly. Okay, so this is not the sentiment that is being expressed in the passage. Okay, the passage does say that Kahlo's adeptness at curating her public image, but it does so in a manner that admires her consciousness of her identity and the intent in her presentation. So she conscious of her cultural identity and astutely curated her public image. Okay, the term cunningly carries a more negative connotation. Okay, which isn't consistent with the passage, which is more kind of showing an admiring portrayal of Carlo. So that's the case with the D is not the answer. Okay, I hope you got this particular question. Slightly the options would have given you the trouble. The language would have given you the trouble here. Okay, so that's the case. So all these are positive words ना, अगर हम देखें तो इसको deeply conscious, okay, astutely curated. So that is the case. Okay, and then later on ना यहाँ पे meticulously crafted. Okay, so these all implying purposeful political and cultural expressions rather than just being cunning about it. Okay, now the author is least likely to agree with which of the following. कि author इनमें से किसे agree नहीं करेगा. So let's go option by option. So option one says that Kahlo arteries least likely. So Kahlo's artistry goes beyond a neat classification of natural surrealists. This is the author will going to clearly agree with, right? So यहाँ पे लिखा था though the label introduced her art to Western audiences, it was also reductive. Okay, so Frida's narrative, especially in the West, shifted to that of a naive artist, untamed and instinctive, untouched by formal surrealism. So author is clear, okay, calling her a mere natural surrealist just is being reductive and oversimplifies her art. Okay, so Kahlo's artistry goes beyond a neat classification of natural surrealist. So this is something that the author will definitely agree with. Okay, now Western media is partly to be blamed for the superficial perception of the Kahlo. Now this is also correct. Okay, the passage gives multiple examples of this. Okay, this the 1934 Harper's Bazaar features on couple's house. Okay, focused on its folkloric elements rather than its functionalist design. Okay, perpetuating Mexico as a quaint, exotic land barely touching modernity. Okay, now the narrative was clear. Mexico was the other. Okay, and then we can say that as fast forward to 2022, Salma Hayek's portrait of Kahlo on screen. Okay, so that is was reimagined to be more sultry and less authentic. Okay, and then again we can say, and in a cringe-worthy 2016 interaction with Frida lookalike from the audience, reduced the artist to a mere caricature. So clearly we can see that the author blames media, pop culture, okay, Western media for diluting the Kahlo's depth. Okay, so to be blamed for the superficial perception of the Kahlo. So this also the author would definitely agree with. Kahlo can be regarded as a beautiful, unapologetic, massive icon. Okay, now this is something that the author will not definitely agree with. Okay, nowhere in the passage does the author glorify the Kahlo in terms of her beauty. Okay, उसने कभी भी ये नहीं बोला ये massive icon status. Okay, in fact he was against this predatory. Okay, so it says the agar in case we get into the maybe the last passage was giving us the hint. Just a second and let me drag it up. Okay. Yeah, so the essence of Kahlo, her life, her pain, her artistry, and her agency is often eclipsed by a unibrow or traditional Tehuana dress. Okay, so and then again, the challenge remains this. Okay, how do we truly understand and this? Okay, and moreover, there was also one more line that we can again refer to here. Okay, this again, I think so. Yet this fervor often dilutes her work into idolatry, okay, rendering her a commodified figure. Okay, So from this we can say is that the author's focus is on not on the Kahlo that can be regarded as a beautiful or unapologetic massive icon. Okay, the author says that it is the Kahlo is not a thing that has to be celebrated as the icon of beauty. Okay, she's way beyond all those things. So this is something that the author will going to least likely to agree. Right now, Kahlo's curation of her public image. Okay, she lost control over Kahlo's curation of her public image. She lost control over her narrative. Okay, now this is strongly supported. Okay, so it's directly given that इधर यहाँ पे दिया हुआ था that she was deeply conscious of her cultural identity, okay, and astutely curated her public image, okay. And then we can say that again later on when they move into it, na? Okay. So this was one of the case, and again here aspect. Let me just read it for you. Okay. So this the self portraits depicts this and this. Okay. Okay, I mean like this I think so that gives you a better ideas. Okay, and again वहां पे भी एक लास्ट में भी उसने लिखा था, in case if I can get the line, just read it. Okay, Frida Kahlo eternalized her date. Okay, remember was लिखा था, yeah. However, such subtleties often got lost in translation. Okay, so this shows that Kahlo tried to curation of a public image. So she tries to control her narrative. Okay, but she lost control. I mean, like she curates her public image, but she lost control over her narrative. Okay, कि Kahlo tried to control this thing, but उसकी जो narratives थे ना, that lost control over her narrative. And the Western media, okay, pop culture, so that is also kind of compensate to the idea that is being highlighted here. So I think so. This is clear. So yeah, okay. In case if still you have some questions, because these passages gets into something which is actually slightly tricky. They are not very simplified. Okay, so that is the case that this the Carlos curation over her image. So the passage acknowledges that Kahlo was astutely conscious of her image, okay, but the her legacy, or we can say her narratives, okay, they were being kind of simplified in popular culture. Okay, so that's the case that the these to agree karega hi karega. Okay, now it can be inferred that none of the following blah 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 and Kahlo's residence in Mexico City are true except, okay, कि ये सब चीजें जो है वो true नहीं है, okay, other than one which is actually the true statement. Okay, so let's see here that what is the true statement out here. Right now the answer is both serve as a profound reflections and give insight into Frida's identity, but the latter representations broader post-revolutionary ideas. Okay, so now for to answer this particular question, now we need to look into a lot of the aspects. Right, so it says that it can be inferred that none of the following, okay, that is what the water gave me and Kahlo's residence in Mexico are true except, okay. So now let's do with that rule. So none is kind of negative, okay. So it can be inferred that none of the following, okay, in Carlos Mexico are true is positive, okay, except is negative. So negative, positive, negative, 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 positive, okay. So that means that we need to find out something that can be inferred, okay. So it can be inferred that this book and Carlos residence in Mexico City are true, okay. So what aspect is true here? Both serve as profound reflections and give insight into Frida's identity. So this is true, okay. Now again we can get into this कि अगर हम वो painting की बात करें, so this piece a profound reflection of her psyche and experiences, okay, so inadvertently captivated by her international acclaims, okay. So that is the case. So both serve as a profound. अब अगर इसके residence की बात करें, okay, so residence was being discussed here. So designed by the innovative architect, the house was a beacon of modernity, embodying post-revolution of ideals of simplicity and functionality, right? So this is also given. So this shows that house represents broader post-revolutionary ideals, okay, which is beyond just personal identity, okay. And the painting also says that it gives direct insight into Frida's inner identity, okay. And moreover again और हम इसका चाहे तो एक और चीज इसमें लिखा था that but it was more than just a brick and mortar. This house, which saw many renowned visitors, was a testament to their cosmopolitan essence, symbolizing the duality of traditional Mexican ethos, and progressive internationalism. Okay, so again linking the residents to the last social political meanings. Okay, so together we can say that both serve as profound reflections and give identity insight into Frida's identity, but the latter, so latter is the Kahlo's residence, represents broader post-revolution ideals. So this is true. Okay, हमें statement में भी क्या find करना है? So again we have done no, it can be inferred that these are true. So we need to find something that is true, right? Now let's see the other options. Now both have been subjected to external interpretations that diminish their depth and significance, but the latter has been subjected to worse distortion. Okay, now the passage does show that external misrepresentation for the both. Okay, फॉर एग्जाम्पल यहाँ पे जो था आपका एंड्रे ब्रेटन ने, ओके, सो काइंड ऑफ the label वो reductive वाली लाइन थी. So Western audiences, it was also reductive. Okay, and then the house was being criticized by वो Harper Bazaars वाले में feature में, okay, that is focus on only the folklore elements rather than the functionalist design. Okay, so yeah, both of them, this is true that they both have been subjected to external interpretations that diminishes their depth and significance. That is true. Okay, but the problem is but the latter has been subjected to worse distortion. Okay, so ये worse distortion of the house than the painting. Okay, the author never makes this sort of a comparative account here. Okay, it documents that both of them are being misrepresented. Okay, but one suffer more distortion than the other, or make a comparative claim that is not being supported. So that's the case that the B is not true. Okay, I mean, like, something we need to figure out, no, something that is true. Now Western perceptions have overshadowed the true essence of both these representation, but the former showcase the cultural identity more than the latter. Okay, so this is true that Western perceptions did distort both, yes. Okay, but it does not claim that again the same problem. Comparison कहाँ हुआ है यार इन दोनों में? Okay, that की former, that is the painting, shows the more cultural identity more than the latter. Okay, so ये नहीं है. Okay, in fact it says इनका अगर house का है, so it embodying post revolution ideas of simplicity and functionality. Okay, testament to this and this. So this implies that the house again has a broad cultural identity. Okay, and only the painting showcase cultural identity is not be that is being supported by the passage. Now in both instances there is a tendency to simplify or stereotype, leading to misunderstanding, but the latter's reception was within the confines of architectural circles. Okay, so again the problem is that, yeah, that yes, the passage talks about simplification and stereotype. Okay, so they say fridolatory bola, फिर उसको उन्होंने reductive बोला. Okay, so that is a game, और उसको surrealist की labeling दे दी. Okay, house को Harper's Bazaar ने that they say it as, no, that it's just for exotic land barely touching modernity. Okay, but they claim that the house reception was confined to architectural circle is false. कि house का reception जो है was within the confines of architectural circles. This is wrong. Okay, it shows the house reception was public and cultural. Okay, it was not just limited to architects. Okay, so they say now the house with so many renowned visitors. Okay, so shows that house reception was public. Okay, and not just and culture, and not just limited to architects. So this is kind of, this part is definitely an issue here in this case. Okay, that the latter's reception was within the confines of architectural circle. No, it has a more cultural elements to it also, right? Now let's see the last question. So the author uses the word fridolatory in order to bring forth which one of the following. कि author ने ये जो fridolatory वाला word use किया है, वो author ने क्यों use करा है? Okay, so the fridolatory was kind of mentioned in the first one, where they says that yet this fervor often dilutes her work into fridolatory, rendering her commodified figure waiting to be translated. Okay, so this line shows that the author is kind of criticizing the kind of the that जो फ्रीडो एक्चुअली में है, हम उसे एक्चुअली पोर्ट्रे नहीं कर रहे हैं. ओके, सो दिस शोज दैट कहलो की जो डेप्थ है, ओके, वो दैट इज जस्ट बीइंग limited to commodification. That is what this is saying. Now let's get into all the options. Okay, to denote that Frida Kahlo's legacy has been overshadowed by worshipful admiration. So the author uses the word Fridolati in order to bring forth which one of the following to denote that Frida Kahlo's legacy has been overshadowed by worshipful admiration. So this is true, okay. But again, let's keep it on a hold in case if we have got a more this thing, okay. अब अगेन प्रॉब्लम इसके अंदर क्या है कि वर्शिपफुल एडमिरेशन है, आइडोलेट्री है, ओके, but worshipful है, we don't know that, okay. Let's keep it on a hold now to highlight the commercial exploitation and commodification of the artwork of Frida Kahlo, okay. Now the passage talks about commodification, okay. नाउ यहाँ पे जहाँ पे उन्होंने वो बात करी है फ्रॉम एवरीथिंग फ्रॉम टोटे बैग्स टू Barbie dolls, okay, but in her image and persona, okay, she is being commodified, okay, but यहाँ पे problem है, it says that to highlight the commercial exploitation and commodification of artworks, okay, so commodification किसकी हो रही है, वो फ्रीडा कालो की हो रही है, okay, commodification उसके artworks की नहीं हो रही है, okay, so Fridolatry is kind of obsession with a symbolic image, okay, not with the artworks of her, okay. So that is the problem here. So definitely the B is not the answer. To shed light on the dangers of reducing multifaceted Frida Kahlo to mere symbols. This is actually the more broader and correct answer. Okay. So देखो इसमें लिखा ना, this fervor often dilutes her work into fridolatry. Okay. And then in case if we get into the other lines of it, right? The essence of Kahlo, her life, her pain, her artistry, her agencies is often eclipsed by unibrow and Tijuana dress. Okay, so where we can say that Fridolatry is turning her into symbols like unibrow dresses, Barbie dolls. Okay, instead of appreciating her depth as an artist and as a thinker. So author uses the Fridolatry to warn us about the dangers of oversimplification. So that's the case. Now to lament the reduction and commodification of translated works of Frida Kahlo, the same reason that we negate the option number B, okay. So the word translated in the text is kind of translated, ये वो translated नहीं है, okay. So waiting to be translated, वो translation वो वाला नहीं है, okay. So it is kind of being simplified, so ये actual translation नहीं है, basically इसको actual translation ले रहा है, so that is the problem here. So in case if again we need to look into all these things, so we can still say that the correct answer to this question is option number C, okay. So Fridolatry is used in the passage as a kind of, you can say, critique, okay. And it says that this is just being the Kahlo is just being reduced to an image, okay, commodified image, okay, but there is way beyond to it, okay, uska wo or uska work, uska cultural significance, okay, it's more than the tote bags or the Barbie dolls, okay. So that is the case, right? So misinterpretation hai uska Kahlo ki legacy ka. So that's the case. Now, option number one to denote that Frida Kahlo's legacy has been overshadowed by worshipful admiration. So, Fridolatry evokes a sense of worship, okay, but the passage main point of contention is that her legacy is being overshadowed by excessive admiration, okay, and instead it's reduction and oversimplification of her legacy that concerns the author, okay. Hence, while admiration is a component of Fridolatry, this option does not fully capture the essence of its usage in the context, okay. तो उसका मेन पर्पस क्या है, वो फ्रिडोलेटरी क्यों कर रहा है, कि उसको कर रहे हो यार, उसका जो डीपर वाला चीज है ना, तुम उसको इग्नोर कर रहे हो, ये उसका मेन फ्रिडोलेटरी यूज करने का पर्पस था, ओके. ऑप्शन नंबर बी, आई हैव ऑलरेडी टोल्ड यू दैट इट जस्ट टच द upon the commercial aspect, okay, and it's but the passage is more about the broader concept about concern about how Kahlo's complex identity and legacy has been reduced to a mere consumable items or symbol, okay. Now the term fridolatry and the broader narrative of the passage aren't specifically concentrated on the translated works of Frida Kahlo, okay, while reduction and commodification are the themes present, okay, but the main emphasis as depicted in the passage is on Kahlo's legacy, identity, and how these aspects are often oversimplified in popular representation. So that's the case, okay. So kind of a tricky passage, I would say, but in case if you still have queries, feel free to connect with me.